students of Reddit, what's the story of the worst teacher you've ever had? A teacher once told me that sand was a liquid because you could pour it. I then raised my hand and told her that if you had a big enough container, you could pour bowling balls. The class laughed, and about 10 minutes later I sneezed. She thought I said BS and sent me to the principal's office. The class laughed, and about 10 minutes later I sneezed. She thought I said BS and sent me to the principal's office. I'm sorry, that's the funniest crap I've read in days. This was a gym teacher. The other kids would often bully me and sometimes beat me up. She would only intervene if I fought back, and that was to punish me and me alone. I went to the guidance counselor one time after getting kicked out and told him what happened. He called her and she said that I was attacking them and they did nothing. Since she was the teacher and I was the student, you can guess who the guidance counselor believed. That's fricked up. One time while taking an exam in my calculus LL class, I got a random bloody nose that dripped right onto the test. After explaining what happened, she said if I leave the room to go clean up I wouldn't be able to retake. My options were to grab another test and start over halfway through, without being able to copy my previous answers, or leave and fail the exam. I walked out of the classroom and withdrew before I got to my car. Should have bled all over the test and handed it in. When I was in kindergarten, my first teacher, she got pregnant so she had to take maternity leave. Then she got replaced with a substitute teacher to teach my class for the rest of the school year. She was very strict and she was not very nice. I had issues with her, but I was a very good student, quiet and to myself. One day I asked her that I had to use the bathroom but she refused to let me go. I really had to go but ended up peeing on myself. I remember going to the nurse and then they called my mom. My mom went up to the school and had a meeting with the teacher, the principal and someone else. 2 days later that teacher was fired. I remember my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. DJO, being super strict. She was pregnant and also took maternity leave. The substitute was the nicest teacher ever, and she was appalled that Mrs. DJO had never read a single book to us. I had a computer science teacher who didn't really even teach the class. First day of school he stood up and said, "I'm going to be honest with you guys, we're going to be learning this material together." He then pushed us all onto online code camps. The beginning of every class he also spent the first 20 minutes going over anything under the sun except for programming. If your phone went off at any point during the class he said that you had to buy the entire class donuts, but he was exempt from the rule. My programming teacher had a similar teaching strategy. The first day he said, "You guys will just be learning on codes and I'll just monitor you," and he proceeded to play the Winnie the Pooh baseball video game every class, even promising kids A's if they could beat it on the hardest difficulty as the rest of us struggled to actually program. I had a teacher that when I got the only 100 on the test, she let me play with blocks. I let out a small yes and got the timeout chair instead, and a note home. This was 3rd grade BTW. The worst teacher I ever had was my shop teacher, gym teacher in high school. He would not do anything at all. I was able to smoke in shop class and in gym class as long as it was outside running laps or something. I never once heard him tell anyone about safety measures when using shop equipment. A few people got hurt and one actually lost half a thumb, but the worst thing he ever did was hire some of the grade 9 and grade 10 girls to babysit for him and his wife. He would leave his wife at the bar and go home to check on the kids and was eventually caught screwing a 15-year-old girl. After a police investigation they found a ton of homemade pee on his laptop of him doing it with many young girls. Last I heard he went to jail for life. This was all in a town of less than 300 people. I had a math teacher who would leave the class to ask another teacher how to do certain math problems. Sometimes he'd be gone as long as 30 minutes during a 50-minute class period. Suffice to say no one in that class learned much. If it makes you feel any better, the teacher probably was given the class against his wishes. Math classes are often very hard to fill, particularly since they are a challenging set of skill for not much pay, compared to other opportunities. As such, schools sometimes ask unqualified people to teach a math class because they need someone. Had a science teacher that insisted that cells were not made of atoms, and that therefore either leaves weren't alive or diamonds were. My English lit professor was late to class every day. She was clearly on drugs. On top of that she didn't shower. Her hair was matted, and she was so rude. She gave us homework and never took it up or graded it, and then would show up and say it's test day with no warning. I had to drop that class after I failed the first test. I believe most of the class dropped after that exam and she didn't come back the next semester. I mean, if she was on drugs, then clearly that English class was pretty lit. I am not sure this qualifies. I like reading from an early age and was excited to learn literature in junior high. I had a teacher who just completed her post-grad diploma, and for an entire year in literature class she would just flip pages and say things such as turn to page 88, highlight paragraph 3, that's gonna be tested. One day she had to make up a class on Saturday and started telling us how much she hated her job and she couldn't go get wasted on Friday night because she had to show up on a Saturday morning and teach a bunch of stinking kids. She then proceeded to ask us to turn to some page and yell just highlight everything. The entire page will be tested. She got fired because she got caught doing it with the IT instructor in the computer lab. Oh, it qualifies all right. 2nd grade. Had a cool girl named DJ in my class. Our class made a joke where we'd say DJ and then VOOO in a loud and deep voice. Teacher was super ticked and took DJ's bag, the rectangular ones with the 2 metal bars on the back, and slammed it against her back. I heard the most blood-curdling scream of all time and the whole class fell silent. IDK what happened to the teacher, since this was near the end of the year and I moved away after school ended, for unrelated purposes. Some crazy substitute we had for geography hit the computer monitor to the floor because of a fly. It landed beside me and I nudged it off with my paper. My elbow knocked the dictionary off the table and I was, and I quote, isolated from class for throwing a dictionary across the room. I was pee off. In 6th grade my teacher wanted to be liked by the class, so he bullied and embarrassed me along with the rest of the cool kids. Gotta love those teachers who are trying to relive their glory days of high school SMH. I'm vice principal of my middle school. The homie Derek Rip grew up in an extremely unstable and abusive household. His stepdad beat the frick out of him on the regular and his moms was addicted to drugs. They all drank and let us do drugs and drink with him. We were in 7th 8th grade WTF. And the kid just basically was doomed from the start. Dude had a good heart though, and really just needed some guidance. Derek rolls into class one day, after having skipped the entire last week. His mom did call in for him the last 3 days knowing he just didn't wanna go, and he gets into it with his teacher. Now, I know from an educator's point of view, this is the kid everybody hates. This is the student they don't want. He's angry, disruptive and says inappropriate stuff in class. He acts out 24/7. This is also the kind of kid that you inform CPS about. This is the kind of kid you're supposed to try to get help. He came to school with visible physical injuries and was severely underweight. There was no goddamn food in his house. He had nothing. So VP gets him in the office and he starts yelling at her, "Why am I in here? etc." And she interrupts him to say, "Let me see your arms." He says, "What? Why? Let me see your arms now." He shows her. She grabs his inner elbow. She's inspecting him for needle marks. She accused him of being on drugs. She said that's why he's so skinny and dirty. She said to him, "People like you will never be anything other than trash. Get out of my school. Never come back." She never reported his family. She didn't do a freaking thing to actually try to help him. He went home and got beat by his stepdad again and ran away that night. 8th grade dropout, imagine that. He stayed on my couch a while and a few other places, mostly slept outside. If I knew the things I know now, I would have made the call myself. But I didn't know any better. I just knew she was wrong about him. She was one of the people that really could have made some kinda dent in what was happening to this 14-year-old boy. RIP. Derek, he died last year. He became the very thing she said he was, and it breaks my freaking heart. My 2nd grade teacher was Sister Bridget. She didn't like me at all. One day I was feeling ill, and I asked to use the restroom. She told me I was lying. As she tried to tell me why I was a liar, I vomited all over her shoes. Okay, maybe not the worst teacher, but definitely the strangest. Mr. Pratt. He was a substitute teacher I had in high school in the 90s, in a city school. He was an older black dude with a loud mouth. There were a lot of butthole students though, who always mouthed back to every teacher, which made learning difficult. Mr. Pratt had an odd choice when responding to these kids. Imagine a well-dressed, but definitely ghetto-sounding substitute who, when a student tried to act out, would pull a freaking puppet, obviously custom-made and looked just like him, suit and all, out of his desk. He would then start berating the student via the puppet. The puppet was called Pratt Daddy, by the way. He would make the student talk to the puppet and apologize. Most didn't. They were laughing and tried to talk over Pratt Daddy, in which case Pratt Daddy, the puppet, would kick them out of the class and lock the door. Then the puppet went back into the desk drawer, and Mr. Pratt continued. It was odd. Sounds like Mr. Garrison. In 5th grade I had a teacher who disliked me because I was bullied a lot and she had to take off it and talk to my parents a lot. One day I was playing kickball and got borderline assaulted by some kids and she came over, then let them go inside. She looked at her dirt covered me and said, "Don't go telling your dad about this." Next day dad went into school and had a very long talk with this teacher and the principal. I'm pretty sure she was hoping the school year would end sooner. My Welsh professor, she assigned textbooks that were out of print, couldn't explain anything for crap, responded to questions by repeating herself, and her syllabus was just header info and a single line that said, "The purpose of this class is to learn Welsh." I was part of a 2-year program in grade 9 in which I took a few classes together in sequence and did the project at the end of each year. It was near the end of the year and the project was underway. We were made up of groups from years 1 and 2 of the program, so freshmen and sophomores working together. I was sick for a week and went to the teacher, let's call her Ms. Module of the year 2 students, for information about what I missed because she was in charge of the project. She told me it was on her teacher page and I thanked her and left. The next day I get a bunch of texts from sophomores and juniors that Ms. Module had complained about me by name, saying I wasn't afraid of her and was a disrespectful student for not checking the website first and asking her before school. She really hurt my feelings and hurt the way my peers view me as a person. She then did it again the next year, this time telling a class of sophomores about how I was terrible at presenting and got a poor grade, something which was false. I got a 92. I then noticed she set the Google Classroom we use for handling things and to automatically share every document we produced in class along with our scores on those works with a woman in Arkansas, I'm in NY, named Jody. I asked her about it and she told me to tell nobody. I asked my friend if he saw it and she overheard me. She threatened to send me to a week of detention if I told anyone else, because she was obviously violating FERPA, NYZ policy, and our district's policy. The next week I took my midterm and failed, 63%, lowest out of 60 students in her class. I've never gotten less than a 94 on midterms, finals, any English test. I asked to see it, she just gave me an old Regents test which any English teacher could grade, because I wanted a second opinion. Apparently she throws them out after grading. Sorry that was long, I just wanted to say something. I would have filed all sorts of official complaints. Even kids should be educated about what they must do to protect their rights. My form tutor for year 9, also the art teacher. She refused to take action when somebody created a Snapchat account under my name and sent nude images to dozens of people around my school. Shortly after this I got in a fight cause a guy was still pee about the Snapchat situation and punched me in the jaw when I had a retainer. From this she decided to secretly send loads of emails to my mother suggesting that I more than likely have autism. I have since been basically forced into getting checked up about it, only for the doctors to confirm I don't have enough symptoms for a diagnosis. Because I criticized this teacher a lot due to this, she treated me really poorly in art lessons and did very little to get involved with me when I reported or got witnesses being bullied. Wow, that's fricked up. As someone with retainers, frick that tutor and frick that guy. 4th grade teacher who led the after school dance program at my elementary school. She was known for her explosive temper and playing favorites. Her favorites were a group of girls who considered themselves popular. Being invited to their pool parties meant that you were cool. This teacher used to invite these girls for sleepovers at her house. Well, this teacher hated me and I desperately wanted to feel accepted. So one day she was testing the class on the 9 times tables, and the way that the test was set up was that we would have to recite it. Some kids were allowed to be tested in private. I fumbled for whatever reason and started speaking in a low voice out of embarrassment that I was fumbling. I remember her just screaming at me why I don't get anything she teaches. I wasn't allowed to sit back in my seat until she was done screaming. I remember shaking how scared and humiliated I was, mixed with anger and embarrassment. I snapped my reading glasses in half. A couple of days pass and parents ask me why I'm not wearing my glasses until I burst into tears over what happened. All I know was that mom scheduled a beating and well, that teacher didn't bother me for the rest of elementary school. Lol. Frick you Ms. N. You're a bad lady and do not belong around children. This teacher used to invite these girls for sleepovers at her house. What the frick? You've been spotted by the curious cow. Comment below and let him know what you're doing. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.